Alrighty. No, I haven't got a job with Tesla. I like this shirt though. It's not made in China, it's made in Mexico. And designed in California, actually Beverly Hills. Bit interesting. We never get any clothing made in South America here, but you will if you buy some from the United States. Anyway, going to be outside walking around a bit, so there might be a bit of breeze noise and whatnot. I was sort of more recently hit another level of maturity, and have a few thoughts on life and things. I'm realising the value in certain things, and it's actually the value in not doing certain things. I'm not talking the 80-20 rule. It's sort of different. Some of you may have heard the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And you know how so many people are sort of so worried about what people think. And obviously I've made a video years ago where I was entirely paranoid about what everybody else thinks, and I had to sort of have a bit of a breakthrough to sort of stop worrying obsessively, basically. And other people in the comments, this is obviously when I was more involved in the channel and sort of had a lot more people, a lot more conversation going on in the comments section, which I don't really bother looking at these days. Some people said their life had followed a similar path, where you sort of you sort of fail to live in fear of what other people think. And it's probably a part of sort of becoming a man as a part of it. But I haven't read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, but I've sort of read the reviews, and the long and short of it is I've been living like that for years. And it is the way to go. You've got to essentially become your own person, or die trying to worry about what everyone else thinks of you. And the best way to do that is to stop giving a fuck. Not become nihilistic, not become completely uncaring, but just not really give a shit about what anyone else thinks. And when you really think of it, are you your own person if you care about what other people think? Why should any of your stuff be tied to their opinion? And if it is tied to their opinion, your entire life is going to be led by what they think. So how much of it is your life versus their controlling your life? It's not really your life, is it? I've also heard the term Sigma male brandied around quite a bit. And you see a lot of these things when you watch self-improvement stuff and whatnot. I never really clicked on Sigma male. Thought, here we go. There's an alpha, there's a beta, there's this, there's that, and I'm glad I did, because I've sort of come to realise that essentially I am a Sigma male. Over time, instead of worrying about what everyone else is doing or thinking of you, you become focused on becoming skilled, and you build confidence from your own skills. And I must admit, as somebody who has quite a swathe of different things, a bit of a jack of all trade, never mind the truck license, the crane license, the friggin' forklift license, 2 different kinds of forklifts, use elevated work platforms, and all that sort of bullshit. And then you sort of get down to the years in construction, concreting, agriculture, warehousing, I understand a huge swathe on finances, understand bits on alternative energy, all this sort of stuff. I'm not saying my shit don't stink. I am absolutely 150% not saying that I can't be taught more and I won't understand more and I won't learn more. And I'm also especially not saying that I have got it all worked out first time round, because as you go through stages of maturity, you realise that you had a smaller version of events that was a bit like that YouTube channel Oversimplified History. and as times go on, you realise there's more and more and more complex shit. You start on the, Austrian economics, gold-backed currency or nothing, and then you start thinking, well, why shouldn't it be backed by commodities? Wheat, oil, gold as well as silver. Whatever happened to silver because originally the British pound was backed by silver, not gold. And then you start to realise that there's got to be sort of an increase in money supply, because it's the Ponzi scheme that causes economic growth, and you've got to have a little bit of Ponzi to it, otherwise there's got to be no growth at all. And this is why fiat currency sort of has some value, in the fact that there's that silver lining of what looks to be an ever increasing amount, because there sort of is. I mean, it's technically a Ponzi scheme, but it's what motivates people, as opposed to just, every time a business venture fails, all we do is lose, lose, lose. I mean, how much confidence are you going to create with that? And there's a bit of inflation, but a couple of % inflation for sort of the enthusiasm and growth that it causes is not really a bad thing after all, And you sort of learn a lot of things in depth to a deeper level. And I'm getting to that point in life where I'm realising that there's some things that don't matter, and giving a fuck about everybody else's ideals on what they think should happen really doesn't matter. And it hasn't done for a long time, but I've taken it to a further level more recently, where you sort of you get to realising that it goes even further than that. There's times where it's just better to shut up about certain things. It's I'm seeing a lot of failings in the younger generation these days. I'm sort of sitting there watching a particular young woman, and I've watched a few around me, and you sort of just bizarre little thing that's all sort of wound up, and that is the absolute shit ability, absolute fucking bottom of the barrel ability of younger women, and even some that are my age, even some are slightly older, to take any sort of constructive criticism. Quite frankly, you get a woman who's, below the age of 35 and quite often even below the age of bloody 40. And there's no ability for them to take any sort of constructive criticism. And this is no more pronounced anywhere than living in being with a family that's full of females, where you actually see some of them making mistakes, and you know that the older females, the next generation, know they're making mistakes, and yet nothing's said. And it's just like, fuck one. And you even might mention quietly, and they sort of said, yeah, I knew that. But they don't say anything to them. And why don't they say it? Because women are emotional-based creatures. And unlike men, where they'll take you aside and say, look, I think you're fucking going down the wrong path, mate. I think this cryptocurrency is going to make you broke, because this looks exactly like scams that I remember 20 years ago. No, women won't say anything. They'll stand there as the whole fucking house burns down, because it's all about emotions, and it's about feelings, but most importantly, feelings on a temporary basis. Most of all, feelings on a temporary basis. So what that leads to is just standing there, not able to say anything, because you might upset the little feelings today, although you know that what's playing out is going to cause long-term damage. So they stand there and they say, it's a non-confrontational thing. And there's reasons for this. Biologically, women have got it built into them that it's all part of keeping babies safe. By no means do they want any confrontation that could turn ugly. And that's sort of built into them biologically. But see, what happens is they sort of avoid that confrontation with the full knowledge that it's going to go bad later. And in effect, you cause a festering effect where it's a wound that's not cleaned up when it's still fresh, and it's let to fester and just get worse and worse and worse. But they will allow this to happen because they're so worried about the feels, the little fee-fee, the little feelings on a temporary basis. And we don't want to stand on anyone's toes and make someone upset for 5 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll make sure they flush the whole life down the fucking drain and never get married. Or blow a whole heap of money on a mortgage application that you knew they weren't going to pass. Or make some other stupid move, but you're so worried about, and it's sort of fucking sickening, to be honest, because I've seen it before and I'm still seeing it now, and it just, being the loudmouth that I am sometimes, I'm not a loudmouth, I'm an introvert, but I'm someone who will just stand there and fucking say what needs to be said. And, you know, there's people where I sort of, I gotta try and sandpaper it back a bit so I don't hit them so sharp. Very often I got to sandpaper the edges off before I say it because, you know, I say it pretty directly. And there's some people who, you know, are men who are deeply honest who will say, look, I do know that and I understand that, but boom, 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 you know. And a lot of it's easier said than done. And this sort of doesn't work too well. And there's someone I'm seeing that's just burned themselves to the ground, some young woman now, and you feel like saying something and you just, you know, I was going to say to him, look, I can see you going the wrong direction badly, and this isn't going to work out for you. Now, thank God they don't have an OnlyFans yet, but if they do, I'll burn them to the fucking ground. I'll tell everyone about it. But it's one of these things where you're seeing multiple mistakes over and over, and if I say anything, I'll be the biggest prick in the world because I've said something. Because there's no ability to take constructive criticism. And I was going to tell them something, and I just felt like saying, well, you know, like, you can take it if you want to take it as constructive criticism, or you don't need to, because it's going to be no skin off my nose if you fail. If you don't get what you want. If you don't get what you'd hoped for all along. And ultimately, I realised that either way, it doesn't affect me because it's no skin off my nose if you do fail. And I was going to say that to him, and then I thought, well, hang on, you're not thinking this through properly. If it's no skin off your nose, why are you even telling them? Why even open your mouth? Why even waste time typing all this fucking email to them? You know? Why bother? Well, because you sort of wanted to see it work out, but you know that they're not going to take the constructive criticism and they're going to spit back acid in your fucking face, and, you know, and then I'm going to have to fucking hear about it and be told that I was the cunt because I wanted to save him from walking off the cliff. Fucking brilliant. And you sort of think, well, really speaking, if it is no skin off my nose truly, maybe it's just easier to shut up, because if you do say something, there will be skin coming off your nose. So fuck it. Let them burn, you know. You want to be nice, but the trouble is, to actually help them, you're going to have to not be nice temporarily and be the arsehole, and I know that I'm going to get a fucking kick in the face for it. So it's just better just to shut up. And I've sort of realised in their old age, my parents too are sort of, they get some strange ideas that don't make any sense. And sometimes the argument is just about the argument. And I mentioned something about someone I'd worked with previously. You know, this guy had got a huge payout. As a redundancy package, you might remember. In the days before, I went and visited someone in northern New South Wales that I worked at a radiator place, and I took a redundancy package from there, which you could only get if you'd been there for a year, and I'd been there for 1 year and 3 weeks, and woo, I got some cash out of that, and that was the best money I never worked for. The best money I never worked for. The brewing things, redundancy packages. Anyway, long and short, it was a guy who'd been there since pretty much the founding of the place, and he was walking out with a fucking hell of a wad. I believe it was over $55,000. It might have been north of that, and it was a lot of money. And so in US terms, that was 10 years ago, so it's probably damn near 55,000 US right now. Long and short of it is, I said, I don't think that guy would have, I could just see that was going to a brand new V8 3 weeks later. He wouldn't have paid off the mortgage with it because he was renting, and I doubt it was going to be spent wisely. I think it was just brand new car, bang, and then go back to working a crap job anyway. Because, the guy, he was in his late 50s and he was still renting, and he was white trash. He'd never made any financial decisions that made sense. I mentioned that, and my parents wanted to have a big argument about it, and basically told me that there's no such thing as anybody who's responsible for their own financial situation. It's all coincidence, and it's all just fate, and it all just turned out that way, and they couldn't help it. It's like, oh, fuck off. This is exactly the opposite of what you taught me when I was a kid. And I mentioned this to my sister, and she said, holy shit, what about our uncle? That's the one this is the last place out of 5 properties. The one who was essentially bankrupted. And said, holy hell, like, all we had to do was just look at the uncle here. He was financially stupid, and he burnt the shit out of himself. He inherited mountains and just fucking blew it all, essentially, out of financial mismanagement. People sort of ask me where'd all the money go. Was it all alcohol? Was it all drugs or this or that? And I said, to be honest, it was just extremely high interest rate payments that swallowed pretty much everything. There wasn't much left. He didn't really even get much out of all of this. It was quite simply mainly swallowed by interest rates at around 20-something%. And they just compounded on themselves and fucking borrowed more money to, But my parents want to argue that there's nobody it's all just coincidence, and some people have just had a hard in life, and da-da-da-da-da, and I was... Oh, how do you know that guy would have done that? You never even knew him. I did know him. And there's a lot of other funny ideas that have come out with different things involving a smoke detector with a battery that went flat, and I changed the battery, but the smoke detector was still going off. And I'm going, what, like full going off? No, I was just making that little peck noise that they make. What's this flat battery? Well, it couldn't be. I just put a new battery in. Smoke detectors are like 25 years old or something. Like, you think maybe it's the battery connection, like the actual connectors that click onto that 9-volt battery? No, it was because we had eucalyptus oil, which must have been fumes of that were going up and they were setting it off. But was it actually doing the endless screech? No, it was just making that little low battery peck noise. Well, that just means the battery wasn't connected right. No, but it couldn't be because it was a new battery. And I just thought, I'm not going to stop arguing about this. I'm not going to sit there and sort of pretend that, like, a smoke detector is set off by eucalyptus oil. Well, if you want to believe that, you can believe it, because I'm not going to sit here and argue that a low battery peck noise is eucalyptus oil setting off a smoke alarm. When you're not getting the alarm, you're getting the low battery noise. You know, one of the things I've realised is that there's never going to be an argument if you just shut the fuck up and don't add fuel to the fire. There's only an argument if you add fuel to the fire. So I'm seeing the value now of just shutting up about a lot of things. About some of my life to other people, instead of telling everyone everything. You know, instead of, you know, blabbing away about everything. I don't need to tell people on YouTube. I don't need to tell people I work with. I don't need to tell even family members some of the things that are going on. Because, you know, there's no point hearing someone's opinion when they know nothing about what they're talking about. And there's no point getting into an argument if you just could have shut up and not added fuel to the fire. So that's what I'm doing. You'll also be pleased to know I'm not investing a single dollar in crypto, so don't worry about it. But there's a lot of shit that, you know, it's best left unsaid. I think it was Louis C.K. who went and asked the crowd, or was it Ricky Gervais, one of those two, asked the crowd in their 50s something, and he said, hands up all of you who have generation whatever. And they all, you know, these 30-year-olds yelling out, yeah, hand up those of you who are in their 50s. And there wasn't a bloody noise. And he said, see, that's something you learn. By the time you're 50, you learn that it's better not to tell people your motives, not to tell them what you're up to, and not give them a bloody inch. Because then there's got no way of friggin' messing around with you. Got no way of pushing your buttons. Because they're going to know something to make traction. But if they don't know a damn thing, the less they know, the better. And that's something that I've learnt, that you're better to keep your bloody mouth shut more often than keep it open. And it's something I'm just learning these days. Anyway, it's my little waffle for today, and yeah.